Teen sees 2050 during death. His prophecies are incredible near-death experience. What do you think are these prophecies? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, 16-year-old Ethan Reed was an ordinary teenager with a passion for science and a knack for asking big questions about life and the universe. He often spent his days tinkering with gadgets in his room, debating philosophical ideas with his friends, or poring over books about space exploration and the mysteries of time. Ethan's curiosity about the future was insatiable. What would the world look like in 30 years? How would technology evolve? Could humanity overcome its flaws and thrive? Ethan's questions, however, took an extraordinary turn one fateful summer day. It was a typical Saturday afternoon when Ethan and his friends decided to explore the woods near Willow Creek Lake. The dense forest, with its towering pines and sun-dappled paths, had always been their playground. But that day, something felt different. As they ventured deeper into the woods, they came upon a cliffside overlooking the shimmering lake below. A gust of wind swept through the trees, and Ethan, standing too close to the edge, lost his footing. Time seemed to slow as Ethan tumbled down the rocky slope. His friends' panicked cries faded into the distance as he hit his head on a jagged rock and plunged into the icy waters of the lake. The world around him went dark. Ethan later described what happened next as the most vivid experience of his life, or perhaps his death. "I felt weightless," Ethan recounted to his parents days later, his voice trembling with both awe and fear. "It was like I was floating above my body, watching everything from a distance. But then there was this light. It wasn't like any light I've ever seen before. It was warm, inviting, and it seemed to pull me toward it." As Ethan moved toward the light, he found himself standing in a strange yet beautiful landscape. It was as if he had stepped into another dimension. The sky was a brilliant shade of gold, and the air was filled with a serene hum, like the resonance of a perfect chord. Ethan wasn't alone. Figures, seemingly made of light, surrounded him, their presence comforting yet otherworldly. "You're not meant to stay here," one of the figures said, its voice echoing in Ethan's mind. "But you've been given a rare opportunity. You will see a glimpse of what's to come. Use this knowledge wisely." Before Ethan could respond, the scene around him shifted. He was no longer in the golden landscape but standing in a bustling cityscape unlike anything he had ever imagined. Towering skyscrapers, their surfaces shimmering like liquid metal, stretched into the clouds. Autonomous vehicles zipped through the air, weaving seamlessly between buildings. The streets below were filled with people wearing futuristic attire, many of them accompanied by humanoid robots. "This is the year 2050, a voice whispered, though Ethan couldn't see its source. "Observe. Remember." As Ethan explored the world of 2050, he was struck by both its marvels and its challenges. He saw breakthroughs in technology that had once seemed impossible, cities powered entirely by renewable energy, medical advancements that eradicated diseases, and innovations that allowed humans to communicate telepathically through neural interfaces. Yet, he also witnessed the consequences of humanity's past mistakes. Ethan saw the devastating effects of climate change. Coastal cities submerged under rising seas and regions ravaged by extreme weather. He saw the growing divide between those who had access to advanced technologies and those who were left behind. Most strikingly, he saw the resilience of the human spirit, people coming together to rebuild, adapt, and find solutions to the challenges they faced. One moment in particular stayed with Ethan. He stood in what appeared to be a global council chamber where leaders from every corner of the world had gathered. They were discussing a monumental decision: the launch of an interstellar mission to establish a human colony on a distant, Earth-like planet. The room buzzed with hope and determination, but also with the weight of the risks involved. Ethan felt a deep sense of responsibility as he witnessed these scenes. He knew he was being shown these glimpses for a reason, though he didn't yet understand why. Just as suddenly as it had begun, Ethan's journey through 2050 came to an end. He felt himself being pulled back toward the light, then back into his body. He woke up in a hospital bed, gasping for air, his parents and friends huddled around him. "You're okay, Ethan," his mother said, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now." But Ethan didn't feel okay. He felt changed. In the weeks that followed, Ethan couldn't shake the vivid memories of his experience. He began writing down everything he had seen, filling notebook after notebook with descriptions of the futuristic world, the challenges humanity faced, and the solutions they pursued. He became obsessed with the idea that his near-death experience had given him a purpose, to share what he had learned and inspire others to create a better future. Ethan's parents, initially skeptical, couldn't ignore the change in their son. He spoke with a newfound conviction, his eyes alight with urgency. When he described the world of 2050, it was as if he had truly been there, his words painting vivid images of a future that felt both awe-inspiring and haunting. Ethan's friends, too, noticed the transformation. "It's like he's been given a glimpse of something we can't even comprehend," his best friend, Mia, said. "He's not the same Ethan we knew before." Word of Ethan's experience spread, and soon, the small-town teenager found himself at the center of national attention. Reporters, scientists, and spiritual leaders flocked to Willow Creek to hear his story. Some dismissed him as a dreamer or a fraud, but many were captivated by his detailed accounts of the future and the wisdom he shared. One day, Ethan was invited to speak at a global summit on sustainability. Standing before an audience of world leaders and innovators, he spoke with the passion of someone who had truly seen the stakes of humanity's choices. "The future isn't set in stone," Ethan said, his voice resonating through the hall. "What I saw was a possibility, a world shaped by both our ingenuity and our mistakes. But it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create. We have the power to change the course of history, but only if we act now." The audience erupted into applause, moved by Ethan's words and the urgency of his message. Ethan's speech at the global summit marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The once shy teenager had transformed into an outspoken advocate for change, his words igniting a sense of urgency in people from all walks of life. Yet, the weight of his experience often left him feeling isolated. How could he convey the sheer magnitude of what he had seen to a world that hadn't shared his vision? Back in Willow Creek, Ethan's notebooks filled up faster than ever. His room was cluttered with sketches of futuristic technologies, charts of energy solutions, and detailed narratives of his visions. He often spent hours at his desk, poring over the information he had seen in his near-death experience, trying to decode its meaning. He felt as if the future was calling to him, urging him to act. One night, Ethan had a dream that felt more like a continuation of his near-death experience. He stood once again in the shimmering city of 2050, but this time, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation as Ethan found himself in a massive control room, surrounded by people monitoring data on holographic screens. "Ethan," a voice called, and he turned to see one of the luminous figures from his previous journey. "You've been chosen to share what you've seen, but the message must come with action. Humanity's future depends on the choices made today." The figure gestured toward one of the screens, which displayed images of Earth's fragile ecosystems. Ethan watched as forests burned, oceans rose, and species vanished. But then the images shifted, scenes of hope replaced the devastation. Communities worked together to plant trees, harness renewable energy, and build equitable systems that uplifted everyone. "Tell them it's not too late," the figure said. "But they must act." Ethan woke with a start, his heart pounding. The dream felt so real, as if he had been transported back to the world of 2050. He immediately grabbed his notebook and began writing, determined to capture every detail. The next morning, Ethan shared his dream with his parents over breakfast. His father, a pragmatic man who had initially struggled to understand his son's experience, listened intently. "Ethan," his father said, "what you're describing, it's incredible. But how are you going to make people believe it? How are you going to get them to act?" Ethan thought for a moment before responding. "By showing them. I need to do more than just talk about the future. I need to help create it." Ethan began working on a project he called Future Blueprint, a comprehensive plan inspired by his visions. The blueprint outlined practical steps humanity could take to address the challenges of climate change, inequality, and technological advancement. Ethan drew on what he had seen in 2050, adapting the solutions to fit the present-day context. His first focus was on renewable energy. Ethan collaborated with local engineers and scientists to design a prototype for an affordable solar-powered energy grid that could be implemented in small communities like Willow Creek. The project gained traction quickly, drawing the attention of investors and environmental organizations. At the same time, Ethan worked with educators to develop workshops on sustainability and technological ethics. He believed that empowering young people with knowledge and skills was crucial to building a better future. The workshops were a hit, with schools across the country reaching out to adopt the curriculum. Despite his growing success, Ethan faced skepticism and criticism from some quarters. Detractors labeled him a dreamer, questioning the authenticity of his near-death experience and accusing him of overstepping his role as a teenager. One such critic, a renowned scientist named Dr. Caldwell, challenged Ethan during a televised debate. "With all due respect," Dr. Caldwell said, "how can we trust the visions of a teenager who claims to have seen the future during a near-death experience? Science requires evidence, not anecdotes." Ethan, though nervous, stood his ground. "I understand your skepticism, Dr. Caldwell," he said calmly. "But this isn't about me, it's about the message. Even if you don't believe my experience, the data is clear. Climate change is real. Inequality is real. And we have the tools to address these issues. My story is just a catalyst to inspire action." The audience erupted into applause, and Dr. Caldwell, though unconvinced, couldn't help but respect Ethan's composure. As Ethan's work gained momentum, he began receiving invitations to speak at international conferences and collaborate with world leaders. He traveled to places he had only read about in books, bustling metropolises, remote villages, and research hubs at the forefront of innovation. One particularly memorable trip took him to Greenland, where scientists were studying the melting ice caps. Standing on the icy terrain, Ethan felt a profound sense of both urgency and hope. "This is where the future begins," he thought. "Right here, with the decisions we make." Back in Willow Creek, the community rallied around Ethan's vision. Local businesses adopted sustainable practices, schools integrated his workshops into their curriculum, and residents volunteered to support renewable energy initiatives. The once sleepy town became a model for grassroots change, attracting visitors eager to learn from their efforts. Ethan often marveled at how much had changed since his near-death experience. The boy who had once fallen into a lake and glimpsed the future was now helping to shape it. But he knew his work was far from done. One day, while reviewing the latest updates to the future blueprint, Ethan received an email from Ayana, a young activist he had inspired. "Ethan," the email read, "your story changed my life. I've started a campaign to bring renewable energy to underserved communities, and it's all because of you. Thank you for showing us what's possible." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. Ayana's words reminded him of the luminous figure's message. It's not too late, but they must act. An act they had. As the world began to take notice of Ethan's work, his story transcended the boundaries of his small town and became a global phenomenon. Media outlets, from local newspapers to international news channels, covered the progress of his Future Blueprint initiative. While skeptics continued to voice their doubts, the majority of people were captivated by Ethan's unwavering determination and the detailed vision of the future he shared. One of the most pivotal moments in Ethan's journey came when he was invited to address the United Nations Climate Change Conference. The invitation itself was a testament to the impact of his work. A teenager from Willow Creek now had the attention of world leaders, scientists, and policymakers. The stakes couldn't have been higher. On the day of the conference, Ethan stood backstage, taking deep breaths to calm his nerves. His parents and closest friends had accompanied him, offering words of encouragement. "You've got this, Ethan," Mia said, squeezing his hand. "Just speak from the heart, like you always do." When his name was announced, the room erupted into applause as Ethan walked to the podium. Standing before the assembly, he felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, determination, and the weight of responsibility. "Distinguished guests, leaders, and fellow citizens of the world," he began, his voice steady but filled with passion, "I am here today not as a scientist or a policymaker, but as a witness. a witness to a future that we have the power to shape. Ethan recounted the key moments of his near-death experience, describing the advanced technologies, the environmental challenges, and the resilience of humanity he had witnessed in the year 2050. He spoke of the interconnectedness of all people and the urgent need for collective action. What I saw was a world transformed, not by waiting for someone else to act, but by ordinary people coming together to do extraordinary things, Ethan said. The solutions are within our reach, but they require courage, cooperation, and a commitment to leaving the world better than we found it. He concluded his speech with a challenge. Let this be the moment we look back on and say, that's when we chose hope over fear, action over apathy, and unity over division. The future is calling. Will we answer? The room erupted into a standing ovation. Ethan's words had struck a chord, inspiring a renewed sense of urgency among the attendees. In the days that followed, the conference adopted several key resolutions, many of which were influenced by the principles outlined in Ethan's future blueprint. Returning home, Ethan found that the momentum he had built was continuing to grow. Donations poured in to fund his initiatives, volunteers signed up to help expand the projects, and schools around the world reached out to adopt his workshops. It was a whirlwind of activity, but Ethan remained grounded, focused on the mission that had been entrusted to him. One evening, while reviewing the latest updates on the renewable energy project, Ethan received an unexpected visitor, Dr. Caldwell, the scientist who had publicly criticized him during the televised debate. "I owe you an apology," Dr. Caldwell said, standing awkwardly in the doorway of Ethan's home. "I was wrong to dismiss you. Your work, it's extraordinary. I'd like to help if you'll have me." Ethan was momentarily speechless but quickly recovered. "Of course," he said, extending his hand. "We need all the help we can get." The partnership with Dr. Caldwell proved to be a game-changer. With the scientist's expertise and network of resources, the renewable energy project expanded rapidly, reaching communities around the globe. Together, they developed innovative solutions that made clean energy more accessible and affordable than ever before. As the years went on, Ethan's vision began to take tangible shape. Cities adopted his sustainability models, governments implemented policies inspired by his work, and grassroots movements flourished. Yet, for all his accomplishments, Ethan remained humble, always emphasizing the collective effort behind the change. One day, while visiting a school that had implemented his curriculum, Ethan met a young girl named Sophia. She was bursting with excitement, eager to show him a prototype of a device she had designed, a water filtration system powered by solar energy. "You inspired me," Sophia said, her eyes shining. "I want to help make the world better, just like you." Ethan knelt down to examine the device, his heart swelling with pride. "Sophia, this is amazing," he said. "You're going to change the world." As Ethan's 30th birthday approached, he took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. He still couldn't fully explain what had happened during his near-death experience, but he knew one thing for certain: it had given him a purpose. Sitting by Willow Creek Lake, the place where it had all begun, Ethan watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. He thought of the luminous figure's words, "The future isn't set in stone, but it's up to us to shape it." Ethan smiled, filled with gratitude for the path he had walked and the people who had joined him along the way. The work was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a deep sense of peace. "The future is calling," he whispered to himself. And we've answered. In the years following Ethan's 30th birthday, his influence continued to ripple across the globe. The Future Blueprints had grown from a grassroots initiative into a worldwide movement, and Ethan's name had become synonymous with hope, innovation, and action. He was no longer just the boy who had seen the future. He was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it worked together. Despite his fame, Ethan maintained a simple life in Willow Creek. He insisted on staying close to the community that had nurtured him and remained deeply involved in local projects. The Unity Center, established as a hub for sustainability and education, was one of his proudest achievements. It became a place where ideas blossomed, collaborations formed, and young minds were inspired to dream big. One day, Ethan was approached by a group of young activists who had been following his work. They came to him with a bold idea: a global youth summit focused on addressing the challenges of climate change, inequality, and technological ethics. The summit would bring together young leaders from every corner of the world, creating a platform for collaboration and innovation. "We need your guidance," one of the activists, a fiery 19-year-old named Amara, said. "You've shown us what's possible, but now it's our turn to carry the torch. Will you help us?" Ethan was deeply moved by their passion and determination. "Of course," he said. "This is exactly what the Future Blueprint was meant to inspire." Together, they began planning the summit, which they called Future Rising. Ethan worked tirelessly alongside the activists, drawing on his experience to help shape the event. As the months passed, excitement for the summit grew, with leaders, innovators, and young people from around the globe pledging their support. The day of the summit arrived, and Ethan found himself standing on a massive stage, looking out at an audience of thousands. The energy in the air was electric, a palpable sense of possibility and purpose. Ethan's heart swelled as he watched the young activists take the stage one by one, presenting their ideas and sharing their visions for the future. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he paused for a moment, taking in the faces of the crowd. He thought about the luminous figure from his near-death experience and the responsibility he had felt ever since. "This," he began, gesturing to the audience, "is the future I saw. Not in the year 2050, but right here, right now. A future where young people lead with courage, creativity, and compassion. A future where we don't wait for change to come, we create it ourselves." Ethan spoke about the power of collective action, the importance of bridging divides, and the urgent need to care for the planet. He ended his speech with a challenge: "The world is watching us. Let's show them what's possible when we refuse to give up." The audience erupted into applause, and Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For the first time, he truly believed that the vision he had seen during his near-death experience was within reach. In the weeks that followed, the momentum from the summit continued to grow. Projects were launched, partnerships were formed, and communities began implementing the ideas shared at Future Rising. Ethan watched with pride as the young activists he had mentored stepped into leadership roles, their voices shaping the global conversation. One evening, as Ethan walked through Willow Creek, he was struck by how much had changed since his accident. The town had become a model of sustainability and innovation, a place where the future felt tangible. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the air, and neighbors greeted each other with warmth and kindness. Ethan paused by the lake, the site of his near-death experience. The water shimmered in the moonlight, and he felt a deep sense of connection to the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the luminous figure's words once more: "The future isn't set in stone, but it's up to us to shape it." Sitting by the water's edge, Ethan closed his eyes and let the memories of his experience wash over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt ready to face it. After all, he had seen what humanity was capable of, and he believed in its potential to rise to the challenge. As the years passed, Ethan's work continued to evolve, and the world he had envisioned during his near-death experience began to take shape in ways he never thought possible. The Future Rising Summit had sparked a global youth movement, and the next generation of leaders carried Ethan's message of unity and action to new heights. Projects born from the summit began to flourish: sustainable housing initiatives, education reform efforts, and breakthrough technologies that addressed humanity's most pressing issues. Ethan, now in his late 30s, had become a trusted advisor to world leaders, scientists, and activists alike. Yet he never sought the limelight, preferring to work quietly behind the scenes. He often reflected on the lessons he had learned over the years, that real change came not from one person, but from the collective efforts of many, and that the future could only be built by those willing to act with courage and compassion. One particularly significant project Ethan championed was called Vision 2050, a global initiative to address the challenges of climate change and inequality through community-driven solutions. Vision 2050 was more than just a plan; it was a movement that empowered people to take ownership of their futures. The initiative combined cutting-edge technology with traditional knowledge, bridging the gap between innovation and sustainability. Ethan worked closely with communities in remote and underserved regions, ensuring that their voices were heard and their needs prioritized. In one such village, nestled in the mountains of Nepal, Ethan met a farmer named Ravi, whose family had struggled with water scarcity for generations. "We've tried everything," Ravi said, his voice heavy with frustration. "But nothing seems to work." Ethan listened carefully, then shared ideas inspired by his visions. Together with local engineers, they implemented a solar-powered water filtration system that not only solved the village's water issues but also provided a model for similar communities worldwide. When the system was completed, Ravi's gratitude was overwhelming. "You've changed our lives," he said, tears in his eyes. "Thank you for believing in us." Ethan smiled. "This wasn't just me, Ravi. It was all of us working together." As Vision 2050 gained momentum, Ethan found himself reflecting more and more on the events that had led him to this point. His near-death experience, which had once felt like a singular, almost surreal event, now seemed like the foundation of everything he had accomplished. He often wondered why he had been given the opportunity to glimpse the future, but he no longer questioned its purpose. He had been shown what was possible, and he had dedicated his life to making it a reality. One day, Ethan received a letter from a young boy named Oliver, who had attended one of his workshops. "Dear Ethan," the letter began, written in careful, childlike handwriting. "Thank you for teaching us about the future. I want to be an inventor when I grow up, so I can help people like you do." Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he read the letter. Oliver's words reminded him of the luminous figure's message. The future isn't set in stone, but it's up to us to shape it. It was a message he carried with him every day, a reminder of the responsibility and privilege he had been given. One evening, as Ethan walked through the Unity Center, he stopped to admire a mural painted by local artists. The mural depicted a vision of the future, with vibrant cities, thriving ecosystems, and people of all backgrounds working together in harmony. At the center of the mural was a quote from one of Ethan's speeches: "The future is calling. Will we answer?" As Ethan gazed at the mural, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had been on. He thought of the people who had inspired him, the communities that had embraced his vision, and the countless individuals who had joined the movement. He knew that the work was far from over, but he also knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and they were beginning to bloom. The next morning, Ethan received a call from Ayana, now a prominent leader in the global youth movement. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "we've just received approval for the largest renewable energy project in history. This is going to change everything." Ethan's heart swelled with pride. "That's incredible, Ayana. I knew you could do it." "It's because of you," she replied. "You showed us the way." As Ethan hung up the phone, he couldn't help but smile. The luminous figure's words echoed in his mind once more, a constant reminder of the path he had chosen. Observe, remember, learn, and use this knowledge wisely. Ethan had done just that, and the world was better for it. Ethan's influence continued to grow as Vision 2050 began transforming communities around the globe. From bustling urban centers to remote rural areas, the initiative's projects inspired hope and action. Renewable energy systems powered schools and homes, sustainable agriculture reduced hunger, and education programs equipped young people with the tools to lead their communities into the future. Yet, as the movement grew, so did the challenges. Opposition from powerful entities threatened to undermine their progress. Corporations resistant to change, political leaders clinging to outdated systems, and skeptics who dismissed the urgency of climate action became formidable obstacles. Ethan, however, had anticipated these challenges. He leaned on the network of allies and activists he had cultivated over the years, rallying them to stand firm in their commitment to change. His speeches became more impassioned, his plans more detailed, and his resolve stronger than ever. One particularly heated battle unfolded in a major city where a proposed renewable energy project faced fierce opposition from local industries. Ethan traveled to the city to mediate discussions between community leaders, activists, and business owners. The tension in the room was palpable as the parties aired their grievances. "We can't afford to shut down these factories," one business owner argued. "It would devastate our economy. And we can't afford to keep polluting the air our children breathe," a local mother countered. "This isn't just about economics, it's about survival." Ethan listened carefully before speaking. "We're not here to choose between progress and preservation," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to find a path forward that benefits everyone. Change is hard, but it's also necessary, and it's possible if we work together." Over the course of several days, Ethan facilitated discussions, presented data, and proposed compromises. Slowly but surely, the parties began to find common ground. By the end of the week, they had reached an agreement to transition the factories to renewable energy sources while providing job training programs for workers affected by the changes. The breakthrough was hailed as a triumph, not just for the city but for the Vision 2050 movement as a whole. It demonstrated that collaboration and creativity could overcome even the most entrenched resistance. Despite his successes, Ethan often found himself grappling with the emotional toll of his work. The weight of the future he had glimpsed, combined with the enormity of the challenges humanity faced, sometimes left him feeling overwhelmed. He confided in Mia, his childhood friend and closest confidant. "Do you ever feel like it's too much?" he asked one evening as they sat by Willow Creek Lake. Mia thought for a moment before responding. "Honestly, sometimes. But then I think about all the people you've inspired, people who wouldn't have had hope if it weren't for you. You're not alone in this, Ethan. None of us are." Her words resonated deeply with Ethan, reminding him of the luminous figure's message. It's not too late, but they must act. He realized that his role wasn't to carry the weight of the world alone but to empower others to share in the responsibility. With renewed determination, Ethan focused on expanding the scope of Vision 2050. He partnered with organizations in developing countries to address systemic inequalities, ensuring that the benefits of progress reached everyone. He also worked to bridge cultural and political divides, fostering dialogue and understanding in regions marked by conflict. One such effort took him to a war-torn country where years of strife had left communities fractured and distrustful. Ethan met with leaders from opposing factions, sharing his vision of a future where cooperation could replace conflict. It was slow, painstaking work, but over time he saw glimmers of hope, a village rebuilding its school, neighbors planting crops together, and children laughing as they played in the streets. These moments, Ethan thought, are what the future is built on. As Vision 2050 entered its second decade, the impact of the movement became undeniable. Carbon emissions plummeted as renewable energy became the global standard. Education rates soared as schools adopted sustainability-focused curricula. And communities worldwide began to thrive, driven by the principles of collaboration and innovation. Ethan, now in his 40s, often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The boy who had once fallen into a lake and glimpsed the future had become a leader who helped shape it. Yet, he remained humble, always emphasizing that the credit belonged to the countless individuals who had joined the movement. One evening, as Ethan walked through the streets of Willow Creek, he passed a group of children playing with a solar-powered toy, a prototype he had helped design years ago. Their laughter filled the air, a sound that reminded him of the luminous figure's final words. "Observe, remember, and use this knowledge wisely." Ethan smiled, knowing that the future he had seen was no longer just a vision, it was becoming a reality. As Ethan continued his work, he became a mentor to the next wave of visionaries, sharing his experiences and guiding them as they stepped into leadership roles. These young leaders, inspired by Ethan's journey, brought fresh energy and ideas to the Vision 2050 movement. They pushed boundaries, challenged the status quo, and carried the mission forward with unwavering determination. One of these leaders was Sophia, the young girl Ethan had met years ago with her solar-powered water filtration prototype. Now a brilliant engineer in her 20s, Sophia had developed groundbreaking technologies that revolutionized clean water access in remote regions. She often credited Ethan for sparking her passion for innovation. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," Sophia said during a global conference where she presented her latest project. "You showed me that one person can make a difference, but it's the power of many that changes the world." Ethan, sitting in the audience, felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Sophia's success was a testament to the ripple effect of his near-death experience, a single moment that had inspired countless others to create a better future. Despite the progress, Ethan never lost sight of the challenges that remained. He often revisited the visions he had seen in 2050, using them as a guide to address the gaps that still existed. One particular image haunted him: a sprawling city plagued by inequality, where wealth and opportunity were concentrated in the hands of a few. Determined to prevent this future, Ethan launched a new initiative focused on economic equity. He worked with policymakers, economists, and grassroots organizations to develop programs that empowered marginalized communities. Microfinance projects, vocational training, and cooperative business models became key pillars of the initiative, helping people lift themselves out of poverty and build sustainable livelihoods. The initiative faced resistance, as entrenched interests sought to maintain the status quo. But Ethan's unwavering resolve and the support of a global movement proved to be powerful forces for change. Over time, the programs began to take root, transforming lives and communities in ways that no one had thought possible. As the years went on, Ethan's health began to show signs of strain. The relentless pace of his work, combined with the emotional toll of his responsibilities, had taken its toll. Yet he refused to slow down, driven by the urgency of the mission. His closest friends and advisors often urged him to take a step back. "You've done more than enough, Ethan," Mia said during one of their conversations. "Let others carry the torch for a while. You deserve to rest." Ethan shook his head. "I can't stop now, Mia. There's still so much to do." But deep down, he knew she was right. He had built a movement that could thrive without him, led by capable and passionate individuals who shared his vision. The time had come to pass the mantle. On the 10th anniversary of the Future Rising Summit, Ethan announced his decision to step back from his leadership role. The announcement was met with a mixture of gratitude and sadness from the global community. Ethan's contributions had been monumental, but his decision underscored an important lesson. True leadership is about empowering others to lead. During his farewell address at the Unity Center, Ethan spoke with his characteristic humility and wisdom. "This movement was never about one person," he said. "It's about all of us, working together to create a future we can be proud of. The work doesn't end here, it's only just beginning." The audience erupted into applause, their admiration for Ethan evident in every cheer and standing ovation. As he stepped off the stage, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The weight he had carried for so long was now shared by countless others, each committed to building a better world. In the years that followed, Ethan became a quiet force behind the scenes. He wrote books, gave occasional lectures, and continued mentoring young leaders. He spent more time in Willow Creek, reconnecting with the community that had always been his anchor. And though he no longer led the Vision 2050 movement, its impact continued to grow, fueled by the seeds he had planted. One day, while sitting by the lake that had changed his life, Ethan was joined by a group of children from the local school. They peppered him with questions about his journey, their eyes wide with curiosity and wonder. "Do you ever miss being in charge of everything?" one of them asked. Ethan chuckled. "Not at all. The best part of my journey was seeing others take the lead. The future belongs to you now." As the children ran off, their laughter echoing through the air, Ethan gazed out at the water, lost in thought. He knew the luminous figure's words would stay with him forever. Observe, remember, learn, and use this knowledge wisely. Ethan had done just that, and in doing so, he had helped humanity answer the future's call.